Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Building Bridges with Greg and Jill. It's good to be back with you. We are very excited, as we always are, when we bring a podcast to you, our supporters, and those of you who listen, about the topic that we have today. We have a very special guest who's right in the middle of some very important things that are happening and things that are kind of getting out into the public a little bit through different media programs. And we'd like to just explore what's going on in the world of polygamy and the ways in which Tonia Tewell and her organization, Holding Out Help, is reaching into this community to help them with resources and love and encouragement, because it's a very complex community to reach into and to be available to and to help out. And she's been doing it for a number of years, and we just think it would be very timely to have this program. So we're very excited. As we often say, please participate in our podcast by commenting and interacting with us. We'll try to interact back with you. Certainly, it's wonderful if you'll subscribe and share this with other people on your social media. It just helps us grow our program. So we're very, very thrilled to be with you again for the month of May with this timely podcast, and we look forward to exploring it right now. So, Jill, do you want to say hi to the people?
Yeah, we are looking forward to introducing Tonia Tewell to you. She's a good friend, and we've been working alongside each other for many years. And so our kids went to the same school, and she's doing some really wonderful things. So welcome, Tonia.
Tonia
Tewell. Great to have you.
There you are. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Building Bridges with Greg and Jill.
There you go.
We are excited. You do want to ask the first question?
Oh, I was just going to see if we could jump in and just, Greg has said that you're with Holding Out Help. If you could just tell us how that started and maybe what it is.
And what that is and who you are.
Yeah, we'll make that a little quick here. Yeah, so I'm Tonia Tewell. I'm the founder and executive director, and we started, 15 years ago now. It all began really when we got an email from a pastor friend of ours, Mike Bell, who you were talking about, and he essentially just said, would you consider using your home as a safe house for people leaving polygamy? And I think at that point, I had just had cancer. I was really sick. We had moved into this larger home in order to have a live-in to help me personally and my 3 children, ages 1, 3, and 6. But I was getting well and I was doing good. And so Mike said, hey, would you be willing to use, your basement, which was 50% of our house, for somebody leaving? And we talked about it and we prayed about it and we said, yes, absolutely. We're not going to live in fear of cancer. We're going to live boldly and see if we can make a difference on this earth. So long story short, we ended up, probably not till a year later, I would say, we ended up getting 2 adult women and 4 children in our home. And it really just changed our perspective on this topic. I'm kind of like, let people just live their lifestyles and do whatever they want. And when they were getting ready to move out, they sat us down and said, would you be willing to start a nonprofit? And so I was a stay-at-home mom at the time, one more kid to get in school. And before I was in banking and finance, but we just couldn't turn a blind eye after everything we learned. So we started Holding Out Help to be kind of a tiny mom and pop shop, and it ended up growing organically from there. Wow. We had people actually in our home for 3 years straight. Wow. At one point, 16 people, 12 children, and you can imagine what our neighbors thought of my husband. So we were,
what is going on here?
Yes, so we were new, and my husband would walk outside, and here would come his mainstream wife, and then here would come another lady with the braids and the long prairie dress and all of her little kids popping out, and it was interesting to say the least. So.
Was it assumed that you were a polygamous family,
I
perhaps?
do believe they thought, I think they thought we were, because people that used to walk on the other side of the street suddenly started walking on our side of the street and started waving and trying to say hi. They were trying to figure us out. So it was quite hilarious. So yes, I think they did.
So really, it's just a fascinating thing how in this program, we talk a lot about bringing people with different opinions together for conversations or dialogues, and how we can do that well, even when our views are very, very different on a number of subjects.
Yep.
But you were kind of minding your own business, being your own person, and you get a phone call or an email rather to say, would you? And it didn't happen right away. You said about a year later? Or
yeah, it wasn't until probably about a year later that we finally got a family. Hosted. And it was so interesting because they were supposed to come on a Sunday. And we had a gentleman that went out to kind of scout the house out to help her. And when he drove by the house, of course, it was a ginormous dude who was checking out the house, and we were really grateful for that. But the father had come home early on a trip, and all he sees is this guy trying to get in the house, which was locked, and this poor mother in the window just waving her hands for help. And so he was smart enough to call the police, and he went and approached the guy. The police kept him at bay, and she gathered up her kids' clothes and garbage bags and got in the car and landed on our doorstep a little bit early.
Wow.
So,
Wow. And so, but that's almost the thing that I was going to get at, just how remarkable it is that people can be minding their own business and, out of their love or their compulsion or even a random thing that God kind of speaks to them about, hey, this is something I can do. And a lot of people are looking for a call or a mission or something to give their life to. And I think a number of people have written on this. I'm thinking of an author that I can't remember his name, but he said sometimes we Christians are sitting at the red light, waiting for it to turn green,
right.
And it turns green, and we're still thinking that it's red, and God's up in heaven saying, it doesn't get much greener than this, so
Absolutely.
just go.
Absolutely.
And we're looking for a plan, a position, funding. All that has to be all established before we even dare step out in faith, but you did it just the opposite, and I think that's probably a key signal that it was a God thing.
I don't hear voices. I don't get overwhelming feelings that I have a calling, but I don't know how much more clear. I mean, when I was on what I thought was going to be my deathbed, I threw one of those Hail Mary prayers, and I just said, God, if you give me an extra day to be with my girls, week, month, months, years, I will serve you boldly in whatever capacity you see fit for my life. Wow. And then this dumps on my lap, and I'm like, I was thinking like making meals for like a mom who just had a child, but we
you and Martin Luther and John Newton, the author of Amazing Grace, they all kind of prayed those prayers that if you'll save me, I will serve you.
Help. Exactly.
It takes those prayers seriously, even when we are maybe not. But so as you began this and started the nonprofit, what I thought, knowing you back then, what was fascinating and knowing kind of what we're all about, Jill and I, and standing together, is that we're about creating a conversation, like I said, that is not threatening, that is not driven by an agenda to get other people to believe exactly like we do. We kind of let that process unfold as God ordains it, or as God would allow it. We just feel like letting it happen more naturally is a safer thing for the persons that we're engaged with. And then even if we aren't influential there, or if we can't offer any help or services, we can still be a friend, and we can still be someone that says, hey, I love you for who you are, and not if I can change you, I love you, or whatever. But I think that's the philosophy you embraced very early on.
And I'm glad you Christians have accepted me with that, because there's a reason I didn't start this as a Christian organization. They come from such religious abuse often. Sometimes they don't. They have a lot of great families in there as well. And so for me to say, hey, you need to believe the way I do, they would have run 100 miles an hour in the other direction. Right. And it's not for me to convert. It's between them and the Lord. Right. And so we accept them as they are. We don't say bad things about their community. We don't say bad things about their family. We really take that neutral stance. So they have a safe place just to kind of decompress and figure out who they are and where their journey is going to lead them next.
That's amazing. Will you just fill us in a little bit more about what exactly do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we do everything from providing the basic necessities of like food, clothing, shelter, and safety. And those are so when they come out, they're often dealing with a lot of trauma, and they're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so we've got to settle the brain down a little bit and let them know that their basic needs are going to be met. So at that point, once they've relaxed a little bit, we can start really focusing on their future. And that looks like job skills. It could be education. We do counseling and stuff. They have a lot of counseling that they have to do. And then life skills. And so really everything a refugee coming in from another country might need. Yeah. So
explain that to our viewers and our listeners, the idea that you're talking about people within our American culture, from a very distinct culture, obviously, and a very isolated culture. But why would they need job skills? Why would they need to learn about basic skills of living? I mean, what's going on that they wouldn't have that already?
That's a great question. And I think we need to decipher, there are probably about 15,000 independents in, Utah alone, that they live where we live, they work at our same jobs, their kids go to the same schools, and they raise their children just like we do. But then there's these closed environments where everything is really controlled, what they do, how they do it, when they do it. And oftentimes education is a really low priority. Okay. And so, for example, if you're in the FLDS, you're usually raised to, if you're doing school, it's homeschool, and it's roughly to about the 8th grade, but you're being taught by your parents or family members that haven't been really educated at the same time. And then the girls kind of go into a quasi-training to become mothers and wives, and the boys go off into the workforce to do, hard labor to bring back money for the church. And so they don't normally have those skills. So the women aren't working. They're supposed to be at home. That's, pretty conservative environment. And education is just low. I mean, I don't know what else to say other than it's just not a real focus for them. Right. Their focus is to work.
Yeah.
So what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? Is everybody just come and stay in your basement?
No, thank you.
Do you have people
we
helping
were going
you?
somewhere, weren't we? So no, they used to, but we had to set a healthy boundary to have a safe place for us to decompress, because these stories are sometimes hard to hear. So we have 2 different properties. One is in Sandy that houses independent males, adult males, and then there's an apartment down below that has a mother with children, and then we have a 10-bedroom home in Draper that actually houses adult mothers.
Wow.
Well, not mothers, sorry. Women without children. And then we have what's called host families. And they're families like yours and I that say, you know what, I've got this extra space. I'm willing to open it up to a mother with a couple kids who need a safe place to lay their heads. And then that allows them, again, to decompress. They know they're safe, and then we can start working on what the next steps are.
Oh, what a beautiful thing. And it sounds like there's a lot of people involved to make this work.
Yes. I mean, in the basics, the food and clothing and like housewares and stuff, I mean, that's, thank goodness to the LDS Church, who provides a grant, and they give us Bishop Storehouse and, the DI vouchers and stuff. And then it's a lot of just people within our community that just have a passion for the cause that actually step up and say, hey, I'm willing to be a safe house or a host home. I'm willing to be a mentor. I might be a counselor, and I can give 10 hours a month to this cause.
Wow.
And so it really takes our community as a step up to make this happen. So.
Yeah.
And so when you say independence, I think you're referring to individuals that are not necessarily connected to a larger organization,
yes,
but they're practicing a polygamous lifestyle. They're living a lifestyle where there's multiple wives in the home. And
yes, so they don't have necessarily a prophet or a leader. The leader would be the male in the home, the patriarch in the home. And so their beliefs are a little bit more, I guess, open, I would say. And then you have the closed communities that have one leader in charge that tell their people, what to do, filter down.
Aren't there some organizations that are less authoritarian and some that are more authoritarian?
Absolutely.
Okay. How does that work?
Well, it depends on the group. So I've got, and I'm trying to be careful what I say here, but there's 2 that are, very patriarchal, follow me or else you're authoritarian, absolutely. And then there's another one that is a little more open. I think they dabble a little bit more in mainstream society than the others do. But the closed ones, their social structure, their religion, their extracurricular activities all have to be within their group. And so they wouldn't go to skate on a weekend like somebody might do. They wouldn't go to a church like yours and I. They wouldn't be able to go outside of their closed environment.
And is this legal in Utah?
It is. So 3 years ago, it was a crime. It was a felony. I shouldn't say, it probably isn't technically legal, but it's more like a traffic ticket if you get caught practicing polygamy. But Utah has taken a very firm stance that they're never going to prosecute for polygamy, but that they will go after the crimes that are happening within these polygamous groups.
And that would be involving maybe minors who are being violated sexually or abuse-wise or labor-wise?
Correct.
Okay.
It would human trafficking, whether for labor or sexual purposes. It could be domestic violence. It could be a myriad of a lot of different things. So just any crime that we would, get in trouble for.
And there is this question. I think a lot of people we all live in Utah, and so whenever we're visiting people out of state, they always will ask me, how many wives do you have? Because I'm from Utah. And so the foundation of this polygamous story, or the polygamy that is more prominent probably here than a lot of other United States comes out of the earlier tradition of the Mormon Church here in Utah, practicing polygamy for a number of years. Now, in 1890, there was a manifesto that said they're not to practice this anymore.
Correct.
And I know that historically it took about 30 years for that to kind of resolve itself, and where new wives weren't being married but older wives were being maintained, until it kind of just, through the process of time, kind of actually became a legit, where polygamy was not practiced or pursued. And then if you build up through the current time, the LDS Church in downtown Salt Lake City will excommunicate you if you're a polygamist. They're very opposed to polygamy. And even with the new laws on marriage that started in 2015 with Oberfeld, they could push for that if they wanted to. They could move back to that style of marriage, and they would be legally able to do that. But there is no interest on the part of the Salt Lake headquartered LDS Church to do so. No. So what is the connection between polygamy and Mormonism or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Historically and currently?
Yeah, I think you said it exactly how I would say it. I mean, it was Joseph Smith who started in 1843. Then there's the manifesto. But I think it's clear for listeners to understand there is definitely a divide. You've got the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then you have the fundamentalists over here. And the fundamentalists kind of have animosity towards the LDS, saying you're not living off your original doctrine. And the LDS are saying, oh no, we know it was on original doctrine, but there was a manifesto and we no longer believe in that. And so there definitely is a very big divide. And that's what I think is so cool, I will say, about the LDS Church stepping up and helping with this cause, because I think sometimes it would almost be better if it was buried for them, but they say, no, we know people are in need and we're still going to step up and help them any way I can, which is very gracious, right?
Yeah, very good.
Can you tell us a little bit about the typical faith journey? When they're coming out, are they saying, I no longer believe in polygamy? Or are they just saying, I've been abused and I need to get away from that? Is there a variety of things that are going on?
Almost a majority of the people no longer believe in polygamy when they leave. But that doesn't mean they don't believe in the faith tenets of the culture that they came from. Now, once they come out and let's say they're walking completely away from their faith, I think almost all of them would say, I definitely believe there's a God. I just don't know what that looks like. And they're completely against organized religion. Now, if I have a mother with kids, because of the incredible social structure that the LDS Church has, sometimes they automatically will navigate towards that direction. The younger ones will not step foot usually in a church, and they absolutely do not believe in polygamy. And their churches, like, where do you guys go?
We're at Mountain View.
Mountain View. When they step into a church like ours, they're like, whoa, what is this? Yeah. They're completely taken back. Yeah. But they also think it's pretty cool because they see every walk of life that's welcome. We don't care if you're dressing fancy or you have tattoos all over your body. And so they think that's pretty cool as well. But they definitely don't believe in polygamy at that point.
Okay.
So would you classify the kind of organization and assistance you provide to people that are really kind of coming out of an abuse culture mostly, or not necessarily, or?
No. So how I try to explain that is, polygamy in general, the people are wonderful, kind, and God-fearing people. But you have this system that is just set up perfectly for a perpetrator to take advantage of the innocent. And so when you have one person at the top, like I'm an executive director, but I have a board that can fire me and keep me accountable at any moment, right? So I answer to somebody and they keep me accountable. There's nobody to keep these leaders accountable. And so when you have people like Warren Jeffs who, molested and did underage marriages, it trickles down from there. And so you have a lot of sexual abuse that happens within that culture because it's not only accepted, it's really normal. And so I don't know where, I can't remember your question, but it's very normal in there.
That kind of community is engaged in practices that really challenge their belief system, because how can this be of God? It's so painful. It's so scary. Families are separated. Children are taken from families sometimes. Marriages are realigned if somebody gets out of line.
I call it the perfect storm because you have the patriarch, you have the closed environment. They're taught the outsiders are evil. And by the way, you get more blessings in heaven the more you suffer on earth. So they will endure a lot just in order to get to heaven because they think earth is just a flicker, right? And all eternity is for a long time. And then they add on top of that, by the way, if you even make one little mistake, you will lose your family, you could lose your community, and you could be condemned to hell. And so again, it's a very ripe environment for people that are not on the up and up.
Wow, that's powerful.
And I think I want to kind of just there's been so much in the media lately. Certainly there was Banner Under Heaven on whatever cable network that was. What was that?
I think it was at Netflix.
I don't remember.
No, it was on Netflix. It was
Was it Hulu? Anyway.
We watched on Hulu, but anyways, then there's
I watched it
Sweet
just 'cause I was up, yes.
which really tells the story of what's happening down in the
Yes.
FLDS community of Colorado City and Hillsdale. And there's probably more. There's certain program series about women leaving the polygamous community. What is that show called?
Is that one Escaping Polygamy that you're thinking
Escaping
of?
Polygamy. I don't know if that's current or if it's still airing.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't watch it. I live it.
Don't need to watch this show.
No.
Yeah, but so that's really certainly with the Netflix. I think everybody watched Sweet and Obey. A lot of people watch it, and it's brought the spotlight on that particular group.
Yep.
So here's the question: they're not the only polygamous group that's authoritarian. There are other polygamous groups, and how many people does that comprise? Maybe in the state of Utah or around the country. Do we know?
Well, it's really hard to ascertain exact figures because they're so private.
Yeah.
But I would estimate after doing this 15 years, there's probably about 60,000 fundamentalists living in the Western United States, Canada, and Mexico, with a majority living right here and around Utah. And although we'll help anybody from any of these backgrounds, there's three main ones here locally, and that's the All Red group that's in like Santa Quinn area up through Bluffdale where their meeting house is. They are scattered a little bit through the Salt Lake Valley. There's the Kingston Polygamous Group, also known as the Davis County Co-op. They're down in like Farmington, Bountiful, all the way up through Draper. And I think the difference between them and like the All Red group is that the FLDS, they're very distinct, right? They've got the braids and the long prairie dresses where, for example, the Kingston Polygamous group, they live in normal neighborhoods like yours and mine. And the only way you're going to go, I saw Tonia talk about this, I wonder if they're from this community, is that they will represent themselves as women who have a lot of children, and that might be single. Or you might see a guy sneaking in and out once a week, in the evening. And the difference will be they will not allow their children to play with your children. They're not going to come to the neighborhood barbecues. And they seem to be busy or have lots of people over or be leaving a lot to their activities. And
that's kind of a revelation of the possibility of that community. Isn't it interesting how uniquely each one of these groups kind of lives out their belief system and how they choose to do it?
Yep.
And the All Red group, is that similar to the Kingston
All
group?
Red group they would probably look more like mainstream LDS. So they dress very conservatively. They might go to a little bit more to an extreme where the skirts are all the way down to the ankles, and they might have boots, or they might even just have regular shoes like you and I have. But they might be in skirts and a blouse instead of, they wouldn't wear the prairie dress, so to speak. The first family we helped out were from that group, and she said, "Oh no, Tonia, they're way more conservative than the LDS church. Like, you have to cover your neck up all the way down to your wrists and all the way down to your ankle." And I'm like, the ones I've met haven't always been like that, but they probably have a foot out the door is why. So they're in the rebellious state.
You're already encountering that questioning individual.
Yep.
So what I was going to say is, if you were to kind of help our listeners understand the drama, the fear, the concern of here's a woman that's maybe been involved in the LDS community, FLDS community, or the Kingstons or whatever all her life. She was raised in a polygamous home. She was taught this was ideal and most spiritual, and she's embraced it. And she's now a multiple wife to a husband with sister wives. And then all of a sudden she's starting to question, what in the world? This is a huge thing that people must understand, the difficulty of even questioning and literally at some point seeking help. It's like the end of the world for them.
It really is, and I'm the hell. And then the other factor comes that because most decisions are made for you, you are in a closed environment and you're landing in a competitive environment, and you are paralyzed by fear making the most basic decisions. So you wouldn't know your favorite food. You may not know your favorite color. You may not know what to put on, in the outside world.
Or even feel like you have the right to make that
or
decision.
have the right. And so our agency is, we teach our case managers, you have to be really, really careful on making decisions for them. So they want us to make their decisions. And we're like, no, we don't make the decisions for you.
Yeah.
But we can help you do a pros and cons list of each decision. And no matter what you choose, even if it's the wrong decision, we're going to back you because you're going to learn by the natural consequences, like we've taught our children from a young age. And so it is so difficult, and it takes them on average probably about 4 years to become independent of our agency, but 10 years to really feel like they belong out here.
Wow.
It's like learning a foreign language.
Yeah.
They don't understand our customs. They don't understand our humor. They don't understand how to do the most basic things that we have taken for granted all this time.
Yeah.
So,
You know, our producer Marco and I went down to the Dream Center there in Hillsdale.
they're awesome.
And what, to think of that property being in the hands of a Christian service organization that is reaching out to people right there in that community as a safe zone, as a place to go, and then it's Warren Jeff's old house. It's really remarkable. But I think one of the things that blew us away, they told us a story of a young girl that had made that decision and through a process dared to leave her home and go there and say, help me, kind of thing. And they walked her through the upstairs where she could choose to pick a room that was available. And she had always fancied France. Now, I don't know, maybe you know this story, but they have a Paris room. They have a French one that has been decorated in a kind of a French style. And different organizations have decorated the various different rooms. And there's some wonderful stories about that. But this girl saw this French room, and she, according to the way that we were told the story, can I pick this one? Can I pick this one? Oh, yes, this is perfect, enjoy it. And when they attempted to feed her a first meal, they said, what would you like to eat? And she said, I don't know.
I don't know. That's their favorite phrase.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not their favorite. They literally don't know.
Yeah.
And they literally, they knew, like you said, that we have to begin helping them make their own decisions. Like, well, you could have this or you could have this. What would you like?
That's so funny you say that because I teach my host families. I'm like, if you say, hey, do you want vanilla or chocolate ice cream? And they say, I don't know. I said, give them a scoop of both, put it in front of them, watch them eat it, and then say, okay, which one did you like? I mean, you really have to teach them to think for themselves a lot of it. It's hard.
And I think a lot of people just can't fathom this,
Yeah.
Religion, I mean, you can go on Netflix today and watch a documentary about David Koresh's group down in Texas. You can every group that's been authoritarian and very controlling. It's a fascinating subject. So people tune in, and they obviously are successful because there's a lot of them. But in this case, where this young lady, literally, dress and style of clothing and her food and choices, I mean. The way in which this story kind of evolved for her, where she made one step after another and kind of came to a place of almost experiencing who she was as a human being, that I'm an individual, I can make choices.
Absolutely.
I don't have to be guilty. And, they did say that she had gone upstairs and was in her room for a number of hours. And I guess when she came down, she had cut her hair. And the people
that was like, I'm done.
Yes.
I'm out.
That's what they said. They said, "Why? Oh my goodness! It's so, you look
Huge
lovely."
step.
But that was like her cutting the cord.
Do you know that they're not supposed to cut their hair in the FLDS because that is only the hair is always braided and taken down for sexual purposes when they're with their husband or when they get to the other side to wipe the feet of Jesus. And so it's a huge step for them even to trim or cut a lot of inches off of their hair. Wow. It's sad. And then I remember one story was it was a 15-year-old kid that had come out. His parents were like, yes, we'll sign over guardianship. He's, a bad kid. I mean, hearing that is just horrible. And he's in his host family, and the host family's like, I don't understand. Every time we want to sit down and have a conversation with him, he shuts down. And I'm like, really? Like, I don't know. I said, let me take him out for sushi. He loves sushi. And so I'm, hey, buddy, let's go get some sushi. And so we sit down, and I said, okay, you got to tell me, what is going on when the family sits down to talk about something with their children? And he said, Tonia, that's called a correction where I come from. And after you get a correction, you get beaten up really bad. And I was like, oh, so now we teach our host families, when you're having any kind of a dialogue, get in a car, be side by side so it's not scary, or shoot baskets with them, or throw a football back and forth.
In a less formal way.
In a less formal way, because they're anticipating that family to beat them up.
So much.
And I'm like, that's horrible.
Yeah. I like how you said that it is a 4 to 10 year process, because that's so important for us when we're drawing bridges between any group of people and how they're believing. It's a long-term thing.
Yeah.
And it's not a commitment that is, I'm getting something out of this.
Right.
It's really a selfless,
It's sacrificial.
I'm going to love as long as God calls me to love,
matter what.
and walk with you and help you. That's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we have kids that choose to, unfortunately, go down the path of drugs and alcohol. And I will just say, you know what, buddy, this is not a place for you, probably, because our program, you got to be clean and you got to be working it. And I always say, though, when you hit rock bottom and you're ready to
We'll
come
be
back,
here.
we will be here for
Yeah,
you.
that's
And
great.
it does not come from judgment. It's because we love you and we're not going to enable the
Yeah.
behavior. So,
Yeah.
Wow, again, I think many people who live in Utah certainly are aware, and like if you live in St. George, there is clearly the Costco visit where you see,
And Walmart.
the prairie dress, and one man with maybe a couple ladies with him, and it's to some degree kind of seen as a bizarre thing and kind of like odd and whatnot, but like so many other examples where abuse is going on and not exposed and not aware of, we have to learn as human beings to build relationship and to become safe enough where somebody would actually trust us. And what I feel, and I want to ask you the hard question because we're in the same boat, I think it's gotten a lot better in the last 5 to 10 years, but a kind of relationship building process or a bridge building process, a dialogue as opposed to a debate, a conversation as opposed to a contention, that process has not always been welcomed by some evangelical Christians or some organizations that really have a burden to help these different groups or whatever, but they come in a much more direct, confrontational kind of way, and we get a lot of flack. We're too soft, we're not bold enough, we're not preaching the gospel, but we do it very intentionally because we believe in the principle that relationship is where any kind of transformation takes place, and if we don't have their trust, I mean, the old phrase is, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Absolutely.
And that's a guiding principle for standing together as we try to promote conversations between, racial division or religious division. And we're just seeing the fruit of that in ways today that maybe 10 or 15 years ago seemed long in coming. But literally, we just sat down with one of the key administrators of the LDS Church and in what they call CES, or the Church Education System, where they are bending over to just say, hey, how can we make this student dialogue thing that you do more effective, more authorized, and we want to support you. And you kind of have to go, well, we always had hoped that this would be the case, but now it's actually happening, and are we okay with this? Because certain people appear in my mind saying you can't work with the enemy.
You know what? And I feel like I've gotten flack from the very beginning on how I structured this, but I knew I was doing it the right way. Like I can't be pushing. And it's interesting right now, Greg, and you said something so wise, and that is building that relationship. So I have calls from all over the country. I have calls from law enforcement, neighbors of these families, and I always say, treat them like you would anyone else. Bring them a loaf of bread, welcome them to the neighborhood, let them know that you're a safe place to be. Build that relationship so if there is abuse, they know where to go to get the help that they need. So
it's so good.
Yeah, super important.
I think there's a few things happening currently that we'd love for you just to share with us what's going on.
Pretty heavy.
It's pretty heavy. It's very disheartening. So the number one thing in the FLDS church, Warren Jeff's in prison for life plus 20 years. And for a while, they need somebody to follow because that's all they know. And so they were all kind of just free falling. Some people had 1 foot in the church, 1 foot out into mainstream society. And then all of a sudden, Warren Jeff's son, who's only 28 years old, has now stepped into that role. He says he's speaking for Warren. I think majority of the people believe that Warren's sending revelations out. I personally think that Helaman's making his move into Warren Jeff's position. But
just like Warren did once upon a time.
Which Warren did to Rulon, right?
Yeah.
And so the revelation started coming, I want to say in June is when I got the first one, but there's been several through August, and they talk about consecrating the people back to the church, especially the girls. And they've specifically asked for pictures, height, weight, family lineage. And you have to understand, in this culture, it's a class system. So you have the dirt poor, and then if you're like a Jeff's, you're going to be, really high in the
Taken
hog.
care of.
And so if you have a girl that's in a lower family and that girl's beautiful and they want to, a Jeff's wants to marry them, the whole family kind of gets to move up in the caste system. And so that was one of the first things that we were like, that's a sign of potentially underage marriage again, which we since have heard is now happening. I've heard rumor, please understand that even Helaman has a few wives and one of them is 12 years old and already has a baby. So very concerning. But then he came out in August where he says specifically, you can become a translated being in the next 5.5 years. Again, that was August, so we're at 5 years now. And if you become a translated being, you have to die first, and then you're going to be raised like Jesus Christ in 2.5, 3 days. And at that point, you will become pure or celestial. Wow. And so I was with 25 women with this press conference we did down in Cedar City this last week, which was unprecedented. You do not have women come forward to speak because you can be an apostate that's booted out or you leave, but for you to go to media or law enforcement, you're considered a bitter apostate, which is actually worse. And there is no hope for you, essentially. And when I said...
And you're endangering yourself with the possibility of being, attacked or worse.
Yeah, potentially. I think more they just will pretend they don't exist. And even people who have left the FLDS church actually won't speak to a lot of the people too. There's this really weird dynamic. Yeah. But when we were all in this room, when we were trying to figure out who was comfortable speaking to media and who wasn't, which every girl raised their hand, they wanted to speak. Never seen that in my life in 15 years. But I said, have you guys read the Revelation? And how many of you think that they would drink the Kool-Aid if that was what was offered? And they all said, every single one of them. They said, we would have. We're so glad we're out, and it's more reason for us to fight to get our children out before that happens. Wow. So it's frightening. So children are being... So one of the stories, tell me if we're running out of time, but one of the stories that I'm going to be very vague on for confidentiality reasons, but we were able to... these children were taken by the husband and were put in a home. The mother did not know where her kids were. She's the one who's essentially raised the kids. The father was quasi in their life, hello or discipline is usually when they come to discipline the kids. And it was interesting because we ended up finding the children. We did a rescue with law enforcement to get these children returned back to the mother. We went through court. We did it all legally. And what was interesting is I said to the mother, take the children and go. And what you have to understand is these kids have been tainted against the mom now. So they refuse to eat. They will sometimes beat their mother up. They'll destroy property. I've had 6 children in another family that completely destroyed their vehicle. And I said, you go, because the families were packing up their bags, and they sent the bags out to me. So I called the mother and I said, what do you want me to do with the bags? And she said, I need you to go through them. And I said, I'm kind of uncomfortable with that. And she said, if you're worried that people are going to think anything, have a couple people do it and videotape it. I'm like, great idea. So we went through, and what we found was they had sanitary napkins, and inside of there was a track phone. We found a battery to charge the track phone. We found survival kits to go out into the wilderness. We found weapons.
Wow.
And so I don't know, were they planning to attack their mother? Are they told to run out to the wilderness to hang for a few days until someone can get to them? And so we think that all these children that are, quote, running away are being prepared and to run away and told what to do, and then picked up by the FLDS and taken into hiding. And we know the one boy that was who ran away, they found him not long in North Dakota. And Heber Jeffs is the one who had taken him and hidden him in North Dakota, crossing state lines. He's in jail.
It makes it a federal issue.
It makes it a federal issue, but what is stunning to me is I'm hearing that he may be able to plea out and not have a day in jail. And I'm thinking, what message are we sending to all these other kids who are missing, into these mothers now that are going to have even less hope, right? Yeah. And so it's very disheartening what is happening. And so we're very much looking forward to working more with law enforcement and really filling them in on, the nuances of polygamy, in hopes that they're like, okay, we've got to do more and we're going to step in.
And that human compassion would kind of be birthed in them. Absolutely. As opposed to just doing the job of the day, but actually saying, wow, we didn't realize it was this serious.
Well, yeah. And I mean, you have to understand, our law enforcement here in Utah are great people, right? But they are overworked, underpaid. They have a lot of cases on their desk. And this topic is one of those that I think a lot of people would just like to see go away. They just pretend it's kind of not there. I'm not saying law enforcement's doing that. I'm just saying in general. Yeah. Well, it's getting worse, and we are looking at another Jim Jones situation if we don't step up and make this if Heber gets away with this, kids are going to continue to go missing even more than they are now. So it's a huge concern.
So you don't necessarily think that these young people are being stolen against their will. They're either being influenced towards this, and either they're running away or they're being picked up willingly by a current FLDS person,
yes,
who's kind of
and it's
reignited their faith that this is true, and to want to leave their mother.
It's willingly, because your alternative is hell.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have an option as a child. And a lot of times they'll say, your mother is a murderer, something really horrific. And these mothers are the sweetest people. And this happens to fathers too, you need to know. The fathers on the outside we've worked with as well, they're good people that just chose to leave that religion, and now their kids are missing, So the kids don't have an option. They really don't. And so they're told, do whatever it takes for the mother not to want you and to get you back into the FLDS. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So,
and again, the mindset of the average Utahn or the average citizen would be like you said, almost like, well, if that's the way they want to live, that's fine. But there's a story behind the story.
There's a story behind the story
that is undeniably true. We're not kind of guessing at this. You've been in this work for 15 years. You've seen it behind the scenes. You've seen the ugly side. Yep. We know what Warren Jeffs has done. We know how he's lied to his people and all the shenanigans and all the very deviant things that have happened. That's not a question.
Yep. And
it's just being perpetuated. It's incredible that, again, we have the resources that they do when the city was literally put into trust. I mean, all the properties were and redistributed to people who had access or had rightful opportunities to re-own them. Right. That was shattering for that community too, but it did break up the monopoly of ownership, and then, like you said, there's a vacuum, and so the other clan, some other family emerges and says, we're going to be the new family.
We're going to be the new family. And they told all the women to quit their jobs. And so, I mean, if you think about all those steps, they're completely dependent on the followers of the FLDS again, which means they have less choice at that point. So it's really heartbreaking.
We do need to wrap up here a little bit, but I would love for you to share with our audience about, we're showing them an example of extreme love, and you're carrying a lot of these really difficult stories that you're hearing. How do you deal with those kind of things? Tell us about your relationship with Jesus and how that helps you to continue to love.
Jill. I have to say, the first year I started this, and I am tearing up, my husband and I, we did not sleep. We had anxiety. We were like, how do we rescue every single baby out there?
Yeah.
And we kind of had that mentality, we just need to take them all out. And we're like, wait, that's not godly in any capacity. So our minds were in weird places. But I have learned time and time again, when that anxiety rises, I know I need to be at the feet of Jesus, and I need to trust him, and I need to keep thinking that one life, if I can help one life right now, then I've done my work. And so if I take it off, and trying to do way too much, it is overwhelming and I will crumble. I said a prayer once, and my prayer was, God, after a year, I said, you either have to toughen me up or I've got to bail on you. But I also said I didn't want to lose the compassion piece of this, right? Without the compassion, who are you? Without that unconditional love and service, who are you? And so God was very generous, I think, to me, and has allowed me to handle it in smaller chunks. And it's getting to be a bigger beast, though, I will tell you. And so I'm at a place with the FLDS and another group that has a bunch of their people that are filing a civil lawsuit. And I'm hearing these stories. I've seen pictures of these kids that are beaten up and the bruises and videos of it happening. And it's almost too much to take. But with God, I can get through anything. So I pray a lot. I pray all the way through the day, every day, and I'm in the Word a lot. So, great question. Now I'm going to have swollen eyes the rest of the day, Jill.
And we are going to have throughout the podcast, the visual podcast on YouTube, your website and whatnot, and there are probably people that are hearing this that are saying, wow, what can I do, to the extent that they can support financially, pray, offer services to the, of themselves, in various capacities. Is there an entry place for people who want to just step in and help and volunteer or do things like that?
Yeah.
And what's the best way to do that?
No, it's a great question. We're really slow with volunteers. So if you call me, I'm probably going to stick you outside pulling weeds at first. We really want to get to know, because if we send somebody that is not trustworthy with one of these clients, they're just learning to trust the outsiders. And if they're exploited or ask too many questions, it can crumble them. So always financially, we have 23 people on a wait list for counseling. And it is literally the difference between life and death for them.
Yeah.
They are in the darkest place of their lives, and I have to say, hey, you got to wait. If you want to open up your home, or if you have money and you want to help build a place that can house mothers with children, we are desperate. We have 4 moms. One has 1 child. The rest have like 2 little kids. If you have a basement apartment, they need a safe place to lay their heads as they're navigating, frankly, this big lawsuit that may be coming up that could take years. And so most of them are in school. They're hardworking. They're kind. And so, I would say that if they want to call, like we just had the Miller family, Gail Miller and her family over this last Saturday, and they were outside pulling weeds and cleaning my place. I came to my office, and it was wonderful. It was the cleanest it's ever been. It's just little things that you can do to step up alongside us. We don't survive without our community involvement. And I need the audience to know community involvement is every walk of life.
Right.
We do not discriminate. We welcome everyone. So
amazing. Yeah. I think there's sometimes when people hear about good causes like this that are really tangibly meeting the needs in various aspects of society and culture, there's kind of almost a paralysis that emerges, like, oh, this is good and this is good and I want to do this and I want to do that. And I always try to remind people that, one, you can support more than one thing, first of all. Yes. But you can contribute in smaller ways that lead to larger opportunities, and just kind of feel your way through. I think sometimes we get kind of overwhelmed by, is this something I should do or shouldn't do? And I think what we've heard today through your voice on behalf of many, many other people that are in desperate need of love and care and support, clearly kind of is an invitation to other human beings to say, wow, I didn't realize, I didn't know, and I certainly have some extra funds, or I could maybe do that or whatever.
If they have specialty skills, like they know how to budget, they're an accountant, they can help people with their taxes. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can get involved, and you just need to reach out and let us know what that looks like.
And we would just say to our Building Bridges community that engagement is the first step. Learning how to actually step across the line into a world, into a culture, into an individual that's so different than you, that you're like, I don't know how to do this. Well, there's no better way than stepping over that line and giving it a shot. We're not talking about perfect people who know everything about this or that to be able to serve or care or love. It's an invitation. Jesus said, and I love this invitation, he says we're to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. We know how to love ourselves, many of us, most of us.
Absolutely.
We know how to feed ourselves when we're hungry. We know how to clean ourselves when we're dirty. We know how to sleep when we're tired, and we care for ourselves. So Jesus says, care for somebody else like that, and gives us illustrations of being in prison, or, being poor, being naked, provide those things. And the invitation then is startling, extended even to, not only should you love your neighbors like that, you need to love your enemies like that too.
Absolutely.
And there's this remarkable teaching that I can only imagine that the early disciples and early followers of Jesus who were in that audience when the Beatitudes sermon was being preached going, love our enemies, that's crazy. That just doesn't make sense. But that's what he said, and that's what has defined Christianity for centuries, is that we are to be called as a people out of the world, but in the world. We're not of it, but we're in it, and we're to bring the love of Jesus, the hope of Jesus, the kindness of God into those relationships without conditions, without prerequisites, and just to engage and say, hey, if this message that we bring is not appealing to you, that's okay. We still love you. We still help you. We'll still come alongside of you.
Absolutely. And I would say, talk to your state representatives. fill them in what you heard today. We need people to step up on behalf of these folks. And we have also, I know you got to go, but we have considered one other thing, and we're going to talk to law enforcement about it, but having a rescue division. And it would be full of volunteers, former police officers, people that aren't going to go rogue. And when we find the children, then we partner with law enforcement in order to go in and get the children. So that's another thing people can be involved in all over the U.S. So
we know this guy named Sean Reyes, who's the Attorney General. Maybe we need to have that conversation.
We're trying to get a meeting with him right now. That would be quite remarkable.
Let me assist. Let me try to assist.
That would be great. Yeah.
I'll put some pressure. I lead this evangelical task force.
I know. I used to be on it a long time ago.
We drifted. Let's have you back.
Hey, I would love that. I enjoyed it.
The next meeting.
I enjoyed it.
All right, folks. Well, we're very, very thrilled to have had Tonia with us with Holding Out Help. And again, check out the website that you've seen below the screen, or if you are just listening to this podcast, the website is
holdingouthelp.org.
Yeah, pretty simple. That's
pretty
how simple it is. Holding Out Help. There you go. And on behalf of Jill and I, we are just thankful for your listenership, your viewership, and we hope that what we're doing here is helping you to kind of open up space in your life where you're beginning to consider who in my world do I need to reach out to? Who in my world do I need to serve and love and go the extra mile with? And what would that mean for me to do that? And again, we would love your comments, your questions about that. We would love to have a conversation, because that's what will make this world a better place. Everybody cries about the political division, and everybody cries about the racial division and the economic divisions in our society. Surely those are all real things, but what's going to solve it? Just more hate speech, more anger, more tension, more gatherings where we tell the world that the other side is horrible and evil? Or is it going to happen when out of the spirit of love and kindness and compassion that we step across that line and say, hey, I could never imagine talking to someone like you, but I'm willing. And that's where it all starts. So we want you to build a bridge and be a bridge builder. So that's our passion here. All right, thanks. We'll see you next month for another edition of Building Bridges with Greg and Jill, and we'll look forward to it.